You're definitely not born as a founder. Maybe you have some extraordinary skills and you have some different skills than the others, but you have to learn. If you want to build a unicorn and if you want to build big companies, you need to be relentless. Never take anything for granted. You don't learn that in the books. You learn that by doing, and the experience is what matters above all.
Welcome everyone on this new episode of Let's Talk AI. Super excited to be here today with Max. Max, how are you doing?
I'm good. Are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Okay, so if we were at a conference right now and we were to meet, what would be your 3 sentences opener?
I'm Max. I'm the founder of Lucis. I'm passionate about health and longevity.
Yeah, I guess you did that great. So I was super excited to have you on the podcast. I'm excited about different things about your journey, health and technology in particular. I haven't recorded much episodes about that. You're a founder, you have a lot of experiences. For the people who are listening, could you share maybe a little bit about how you ended up on that health journey? And then I have like very specific questions where we get more in the weeds, but how did you end up into YC and on that mission with your co-founders? Super keen to hear about that.
So I've been a founder. This is my third company, and I have been in B2B SaaS for my entire life. I've built 2 companies around data in SaaS. So I think that's the link with this one. And also on the side, I've been really passionate about health and what we call biohacking, even though I don't like the words. I've been experimenting with my health for a very long time, exploring all sorts of like nutrition, diet, supplements, exercise, and routines, and everything around health, longevity, biohacking. As a SaaS founder, European SaaS founder, I've always been passionate about what's happening in the US, especially on the consumer side of things. So I love how US people build very strong brands that people really look up to, like they're really passionate about. I've been exploring that around health, wellness, and longevity. And I met my co-founders a couple of years ago. So we're 3 co-founders, and one I met him like 10 years ago around like SaaS and B2B, and both founders with separated company. And the other one, I met him like 4 years ago on Twitter, talking about health and tech and product and etc. We've experimented a lot with one of my co-founders on various ideas we wanted to on mobile app, AI, etc. And at some point, we were really like into these things, health, longevity, and we stumbled upon like Brian Johnson. I thought about building a company in health for years, but it never like really clicked what exactly I was supposed to do. And I think at this time it clicked when we saw Brian Johnson, like his blueprint, the data, and all the, very scientific approach for him, even though it's not really like, it's very criticized because he's doing experimentation only on him and blah, blah, blah. But I think it was really interesting how he was sharing his data and openly and sharing his markers and like doing like everything he was doing was like he test, learn, and measure. We saw an opportunity to like build a community of people excited about Brian Johnson and the longevity in general. And we built that French and European community. It started to take off in less than 2 years. We had 1,000 members within the community across Europe sharing every day. It's super active. It's like on WhatsApp and Discord and Reddit. It's super active. And every day there's a ton of people exchanging ideas, talking about all the things like health, nutrition, exercise, supplementation, gadgets, and all the things. And that's how the Lucy adventure started. Back in the day, we were called the Zero Club. And we started experimenting some ideas with this idea of like the blood testing and all the things we're doing today. And that's when our third co-founder joined, and we met also doctors that we realized we have everything we need to build that platform and to build that product. So there's something to be built in Europe because there's some companies in the US that are building amazing things, but here in Europe, we don't have access to that. So why not? And with the community in mind and with talking to a lot of people within the community, we understood that there was something to build in Europe. And that's how we started with Lucy.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I will ask a bit more about the YC chapter and how you iterated on the offering and how you grew from those first weeds to what Lucy is today.
Mm-hmm.
Just before getting into that, you have a lot of experience with B2B SaaS. So I would like to ask you about just that. For all the builders who are listening right now, you started 3 companies. Do you have some lessons that you can share about building B2B SaaS or iterating on an idea? And so the way you can frame that is in all your previous experiences. So there is a product aspect, but there is also growth and validating an idea. So do you have lessons that might not be obvious for people listening about building B2B SaaS or companies in general, those early days, especially? For example, you met your co-founders and you kept talking about specific ideas and then it clarified towards a movement and it started with a community. Some people would like start building. I mean, there are different ways to
Yeah.
look at this, but what are your thoughts and ideas around that?
Yeah. I think so. I think especially in the age of AI, I think you need to nail the distribution. That's the main thing. I think 10 years ago, you could build a product in your cave or like in your garage and then goes to the market and try to adapt the product. And suddenly you start selling it, et cetera, et cetera. But I think today, I think if you don't need distribution by day one, integrating into the product, it's going to be super hard, especially with AI, because everything you can copy, like you can copy almost everything in minutes. The things that we were seeing back in the day was like, oh, Google can copy that. Of course, they could hire like 100 engineers and build that in 6 months, blah, blah, blah. I think in the age of AI, it's like even like more true is like nobody can copy your product. So your product is definitely not a moat anymore. So I think distribution is, and nailing that is probably the most important things you could do today. So connected to that, what I see the most is people who are waiting to get the perfect idea before starting. And I think that's not how you build a company. Based on my experience, at least, I've never done that in my life. I think based on my experience, you have to start somewhere. You have to start with an idea, with something. You have to start something, building, shipping, showing, putting in front of users. That's what YC teach you. It's like you spend most of your time at YC in build mode, which is like trying to get your product or at least in front of customers, talking to people, sign deals before even having the first line of codes. And that's what they teach you. And I think that's how people should do now. So that's my learning is like, don't try to overthink and don't try to think about okay, but this product will never work because XYZ. You don't care. We don't care. That's fucking bullshit. Just do something, ship it and iterate on it. And after a couple of weeks, it's gonna compound. I've got some friends in the field who works at startups and they were very skeptical about what we were doing. They were not understanding oh, you're just building a community, but what are you gonna do with the community? You're you don't have a product and the business model is really weird and people don't understand that, but we build the distribution first. That's what is mind blowing. It means that when we build a product, we had almost instantaneously 100 paying customers in a week. And this is not possible with starting to overthink a product and stuff. So that's my learning.
I love it. And this is very fun. So you have a lot of growth roles in your background.
Yes.
Some very impressive, including Buffer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
you have some very impressive numbers there. You spend a lot of time around product growth and everything. I couldn't agree more. Building, iterating. I feel that the simplest formula to build anything is just building the product or talking to users. When I say talking to users, you have the distribution, but you in that specific case, having access to this community, you already had the people, you already had what are the problems, how to solve them, how is it being solved in other countries. You were able, by doing this earlier stage, maybe thanks to your previous growth roles, it was easy for you to channel this energy and this curiosity of yours and your co-founders into something bigger, unifying people, and then solving the problem. It feels to me with all the conversations that I've had that it's not that often. I mean, I guess it depends, but building the distribution and then getting for a product maybe for some tech co-founders, they will start with a product and talk to users. My point being that based on the type of founders that you are, you might face challenges in different areas. Do you have some thoughts or ideas to share about types of founders? Like, for example, how many of your co-founders are technical?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can share some lessons about distribution and growth. Just one of three, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so one of three is technical. You had that user base and all that community. Is this how you build your other companies too? Do you have like insights about...
No.
Okay, can you share more on that?
So the first company I built was catastrophe. So the first one, I was really young, no experience, no networks, nobody helping us. I was in the south of France, in Montpellier, working on like what we call AI today, which was called machine learning back in the day. And we were working with scientific labs that were doing research and amazing progress on like machine learnings and stuff. And we were like using their tech to like analysis of like social networks and like, so it was the early days of social listening, what we call that. It was called social listening. It was like the brand. There was this product that were like connected to Twitter, Facebook, etc. And they were like doing like graphs and stats about like how many people were talking about your brands and blah, blah, blah. And we were doing the analysis on top of that. There was multiple teams in the world working on that, of course, but we were one of the first doing like sentiment analysis and also categorizing the topics, like the topics of like what people were talking about. And it was super hard back in the day to do that. Now, like with AI, it's like you do that in a second, but back in the day, it was not possible. We did everything wrong, like building the product before talking to our customers and blah, blah, blah. That's when I started to read like some content from the US, from like people who were building companies. And it was the early days at Basecamp, and they were sharing a lot of learnings and knowledge. And it was super interesting. They were the first to start asking for people to pay online and for a SaaS product. And they were like switching from agency to building a product and having like customers on that product and understanding that you can't scale an agency, but you can scale a product because SaaS is perfect for that. So yeah, so the first company, we did everything wrong, starting by like thinking that you shouldn't talk about your product and all this shit. I was trying to read as much as possible, and I discovered that at some point we were like really wrong, and we were going into the wrong directions, and we managed to somehow be acquired by a quite bigger company and joined this company. Then I joined Buffer. So we did quite the opposite of like what we did with my first, starting with like even like a landing page, starting to like trying to sell the product before having the product, building the first line of code. And we sold already a subscription before even like building the first version of the product. And then we iterated, etc. So I think in that sense, that was really cool, but we never like thought too much about distribution. I think there's this mantra of like first time founders build products, second time they're obsessed with products, second time obsessed with distribution, and third time about margin or something like that. But at some point we had some struggle with like building the product, etc. It was like hard for us to scale the product, and we didn't really implement in the right playbooks and blah, blah, blah. So we decided to do something else and change a little bit the course of the company, give back the investment from the investors. One of my co-founders sold the company like 2 years ago to another business. The third one now, like we're building it very differently. We started with like the distribution in mind. And I think it was more around like, we don't know exactly what we want to build, but we know that if we build a community of people, we're going to get access to potential customers. We're going to chat with people, which was amazing as well. Because of this community, we attracted also a lot of companies that were targeting the customers in our community. So they were contacting us, and we had access to many type of different like business companies, etc. So in a short period of time, you are able to like talk with customers, understand what they need, what they want, and see the market, how the market is evolving, who's building what, and the type of product. And you know that, okay, there's an opportunity there. And we could totally have stayed with our community and did a few experimentation, did like something community gated or asked for people to pay. We could have done that. But because we were like SaaS founders, we were obsessed with building a product, delivering values to our customers. And also with my experience, like personal experience with like blood test and the struggle to get access to that in Europe, we knew there was something to build, which was at least scalable across like France and Europe. We got excited when we realized this is an issue that we're solving not only for French, but for the entire Europe. That was exciting for us.
You shared very interesting things. I want to ask something very specific, which is around technical and non-technical co-founders. And then I will double click on a few things that you just shared. I've got multiple time questions for non-technical people who are kind of trying to find fast tracks. They're like, wow, I have this amazing idea of an app. A lot of time it's like a social app. It's like, well, can you imagine if you had like this thing and like, how do I find a technical co-founder? And so I feel that there are like different levels of entrepreneurs and skill sets. And so my question to you, of course, you're very skilled in distribution, in sales, but also in the mentality of SaaS, B2B SaaS, how to build products. There are like two sides of the question. How do you see yourself working with your technical co-founder and the technical team so that you have all these calls, all this community, all these growth capabilities? How do you serve as a proxy to know what to build, how to build it from blood tests and everything? I imagine that it's not only product, there are also systems and steps and operations, which I think is like a huge part of the entrepreneurial skill set, just operation in itself and being able to set things. Hiring is another one. So how do you manage that relationship with technical co-founder and the technical team? That's like one side of the question. The other side of the question is like, what are the core skills that you continually grow? What tools do you use? How do you see your skill set and how do you make sure that you keep improving on top of that? So two sides of the question, start wherever you want, where it's funnier.
Okay, so relationship with tech. I see the product as an enabler for growth. So this is really part of the equation of like growing the business today is like it comes down to the effect for our users, but it's also tied to what we're building. Like what we're building is a preventive health platforms. We sell a subscription, a yearly subscription directly to the consumer where people can get access to like 2 blood tests per year. This is our website. They get access to 2 blood tests per year. First one, more advanced. Second one, a little bit shorter, I would say. So we partner with lab networks across Europe. You take the subscription on our website. You book a lab visit. You go to a lab close to your place. You do your blood work. We get the data from the lab and we build the AI stack that's gonna do the analysis for you. And we're gonna provide you with a full summary of your health plus actions and super personalized actions based on your own needs and own markers. And we have a very deep like forms at the beginning of the platforms where we ask you a question around your backgrounds, like your health, your family story, your personal history with health and what you eat, what's your exercise routine and blah, blah, blah. And then based on that, with the markers, we're going to be very deep into actions recommendations. So switch your exercise routine from like you're doing 2 cardio and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we sell. And it's accessible in France, in the UK, in Ireland and in Portugal. And we are going to happen like more countries in the coming months. Basically, that's what we do. Because of that, to go back to your question, the relationship with the tech is the product is really important because like in our case, like how do you analyze the data? How do you make the data really actionable is very important. In our companies, it's a connection between, it's a triptych between like medical, tech, and UI experience, so design. So it's really important for us to nail that down. So growth is working with like 3 components to like make sure that the product is growing and that we're building the perfect product. The tech team is into like product and user experience. And my CTO, my co-founder, is really also product oriented. So he's also leading the product. So we sort of like shortened we don't have a product manager at Lucy. And I think for now, the product is led by the founders because we have the understanding of years of experimentation with every tool on the market. So we shorten the cycle of like feedbacks, and we constantly talk to customers as well. And the tech team is also doing that. We work super closely, but I don't like handle tech or like whatever. We do like weekly, daily calls, sort of like brainstorm like the next steps, and when we do the roadmap and the product roadmap and stuff like that. Other than that, like the tech team is like very like working on the product by themselves.
Awesome, super cool. So on that second half of the question, you have this very tight loop between the team. I like what you mentioned. No people in the middle, just the vision and building, having people building, talking to customers. So I would assume that you have some processes in place. And from your perspective and the current levers that you activate, how do you grow? But also I'm curious about how do you activate the levers for Lucis?
There's really multiple angles to that. First is, I think it's AI. It's magic how you can grow and learn from AI, just like having a conversation with ChatGPT and doing the right prompts, growing yourself, like various like skills that you feel you need to improve yourself. That is the first thing. The second one is probably podcast readings, all the things learning from the people who did it before, who grew companies. Like the YC network is also amazing for that, connecting with the right people. And then coach, advisor, like mentors. Thanks to like the network of investors that we have today, we've been able to reach out to many great people. And that's how we grow at Lucy. We sort of like all trying to have mentors that help us grow in our field. So in mine, I'm the CEO, so I'm trying to get better at hiring, get better at managing people, or trying to make sure that we are going into the right directions. That's how I grew myself in my field. And we try also to challenge ourselves all together. And you also can grow by trying to hire people better than you at something. Hire someone that is better at you that with ops, with operations, and you hire some like rockstar operations that did that perfectly at Uber Eats or like Deliveroo or whatever. You hire someone, they join and they teach you everything. So in a couple of like days, week, they apply the playbook and you learn the playbook. And that's amazing how you learn. That's basically the recipe.
Just to like put the pieces together, you had this idea, you started iterating on it with your co-founders. That's your third company, healthcare oriented.
Yes.
Long story short, things go well and there is traction. You arrive to YC at some point. I'm not sure how big of a moment that was necessarily for your team, but do you want to share a little bit, maybe as a French entrepreneur going into the Valley and being part of the YC process? How was that? Before like I continue on all the other super cool stuff, I do want to talk about mentoring, hiring, culture, all these kind of things. But how was that YC chapter like?
As you can imagine, that was life-changing. With my co-founders, we always dreamed about like joining YC, doing YC with one of our past companies. And with my previous one, I got to the interview, but we never got accepted. And I think for every like project or like ideas I had in the past, I try to fill the YC form at least, because it's really interesting. It challenges you to think about how to think about your business. And the question they're asking in the form, like the application form, are really interesting. With like many ideas I had in the past before Lucy, I try to fill at least the form, even like if you don't push the button, like you don't apply, really try to fill the form. So we decided to do that, to fill the form and as an exercise first, because we were not convinced YC would accept us with a business like us. We didn't know if we could be the right fit for YC or not. And then suddenly the idea started to grow in our mind that like the business was scalable and we could definitely take over Europe, and definitely it could be a worldwide business, if I can say that. So we decided to push the application. And yeah, we got into the interview. It was like very stressful and very exciting at the same times. And after like a few, like 2 days of like crazy events, we got accepted. And wow, that was like the best part of like 2025, I think. That was so exciting. And we had 3 weeks to pack, find Airbnb in San Francisco and take the plane and go to San Francisco and start YC. So we were crazy excited. We joined YC in April, I think, the April 2nd or something like that. And the cohort was starting April 7th or something like that. We already were in the YC mindset before, like, the weekly, trying to improve your metric every week, trying to know exactly what to do to improve, etc., etc. So we got into that mindset weeks before doing YC. And by the way, when your partners, like, you get the call with your partners and he's telling you you're accepted, he's saying like YC starts now. And you're 3 weeks before YC. And at the end of YC, they tell you YC don't end now. But trying to get that mindset. So I think it was a life-changing event in the sense that when you join YC, something you realize is that we're not allowed to dream big in Europe. When you start talking with people in YC, say, okay, you're very shy. You say, yeah, I want to do $1 billion company. And they look at you and they say, only? And then you're like, okay, what the fuck is happening? In the US, and especially in San Francisco and at YC, people dream big. They're very ambitious. You need to be very, 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 very ambitious to get to a point where it's ambitious. You need to shoot Mars for going to the moon, right? So that's the goal. That's what we learned. We learned to be very ambitious. We will work like crazy. They're giving you an advice the first 3 days. When you got into YC, you have the first 3 days with like partners, calls and presentation. And they tells you every day, every minute, every single minute counts before demo day. So everything you can do before demo day to show a better company in the eyes of the investors count. There's some alums that comes on stage and tells you, oh, this was the most brutal period of my life. I've never worked so much, blah, blah, blah. And it was true. So we decided to apply that. We decided that we were in the US. We had nothing else to do than like shipping, building, like working, like growing the company, etc., and the product. So that's what we did. And I think it paid off. That was really, really cool. Super experience. A lot of learnings. We got back to Europe after YC because our market is in Europe. But to be honest, we would have been very excited to stay in the US, but no excuse. Our market is in Europe. So we're trying to bring back that mindset of YC, trying to be relentless and trying to have like this velocity of shipping, learning, improving, iterating on that every single day. That's what we're trying to do. Yes. So that's what YC for us.
That's so cool. Thank you very much for sharing all those steps. What I love about YC is that, one, it's very hard to get in.
The acceptance rate for the number of people who applied to the number of people who got accepted into the cohort was like 0.8% only. It's like crazy.
Yes. So for everyone listening, I think that if you want to get into YC, being 100% sure that you will get in, you just need to increase your entrepreneurial skill set over and over and apply every 6 months at every batch.
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
And it would be very unlikely if you don't change your mind or you don't care anymore. But I think it would be very unlikely that you won't get in because you will have the level of entrepreneurial.
I mean, yes, it depends if you learn to learn. And I think there's a stats, they shared it when we joined YC. And I think most of the people who got accepted already applied 2 or 3 times before, like with other projects, sometimes the same, but they refine the ideas, they show progress. And I think that's part of the reason why they decided to do like 4 batch a year now. They used to do 2 batches, and I think they do 4 batches now. The main reason of that is like because of AI, things got super fast. And now a company that's used to be like in that position in September, the progress they were doing, they're catching up like with the next stage during the winter was cool. But now they need to follow the trend. So like people grow and grow like super fast now. So it was not making any sense anymore. So that's why they moved to 4 batches a year. And we were the first like spring batch ever. So that was the first cohort of the spring batch.
Love it. And I couldn't agree more. The velocity at which anyone can build is crazy. And so we can solve so many problems super fast, which is also very interesting because you can have very, very, very young people that are extremely smart, that are allocating resources extremely well.
Yeah.
And they will move super fast.
There's a lot of dropouts college, especially from the US at YC. The cohort was super young. I was one of the oldest person in the room.
I also have the feeling that there is more and more technical co-founders. So like the dropouts in general, I feel that they are more technical or they were like studying computer science or something, which is something that I really enjoy. This is more of a personal view, but when you think about an educational system, you just mentioned learning to learn. And I think that when you just focus on that unique skill of learning to learn, then you don't need anything because you just need to pick the problem, understand, learn what works, what is possible to do. But once you have that experience, okay, how can I apply it? And then you learn the reality of things. And this is such a big iteration loop of learning, which is my point about if you want to get into YC and this is like something that is big, just focus on that and you will get in 100% sure in the time of like 10 years, I think is like quite safe. And if you don't get closer, then maybe it's not for you, or maybe you're not really
Yeah.
in or whatever reasons. Don't blame me if that happens to you. Okay, so speaking about learning to learn in the remaining time that we have, you mentioned a lot of interesting things before. At Buffer, you were doing growth, some very impressive numbers on the YC batch and with your investors and your mentors and the culture that you're implementing in your company. You want everyone to have that mindset of learning to learn. And you mentioned operations, hiring. Also, one thing that seems interesting to me with your company is the business model and the validation. How do you go about B2B SaaS? You might want to try to like just focus on people, but you do focus also on companies. And so there are a lot of pieces that show some levels of all these areas. But as a CEO, you have to oversee everything and you have to continuously make those skills grow. Do you have any opinions or lessons that you want to share about learning to learn? You mentioned podcasts, reading, etc. And second, what are some learnings that happened to you this year that you understood at another level?
Never take a no for an answer. It's like there's always a yes somewhere. There was like people in our batch, like they were dropouts of college, super young. They're very good. First week, they didn't had any revenue, and they were so frustrated about like the first like the cohort like calls and with like your like 10 or 15 companies in the same groups, and you chat on a 2 weekly basis and you share your experience, like what you learn and your metrics and stuff. And he was like so frustrated about like not doing like any revenue. He was like, I'm gonna do some revenue, and whatever it takes, I'm gonna do some revenue. They took planes to go to visit the customers. He slept in a tent, and it was so amazing to witness. Being relentless, I think that's one of the biggest learning for me this year is like, if you want to build a unicorn and if you want to build a big companies, you need to be relentless. You never take anything for granted. You need to question everything, be obsessed about some things. That's one of the biggest learnings. Then in terms of like skills, what I'm learning on daily basis is like how to like properly hire. I think that's something I did it at Buffer, but I was not the one that was designing the hiring process and all the things. But this time we had to do that by ourselves. So you need to understand every step of the flow. That's the biggest skills set I'm learning. I had companies before, but I think this is the first time I have like 13 employees so far. This is the first time of my life. The team is so big. And I think also this is the first time like the right amount of process and the right amount of weekly meetings and stuff like that, like team organization and stuff. So I feel this is the first time it's so well organized and everything is really smooth. So this is very exciting, but also that's a thing I'm learning. I'm constantly learning. As founders, you have to constantly learn that because every stage will be different. Like we're 15, maybe in 6 months we'll be 30, and maybe later more, and this is definitely not the same company. So yeah.
There is this book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yeah. Yes.
There is a lot about CEOs. And if you think that CEOs are born, you're wrong.
Yeah.
CEO is just a role as like just continuously need to upskill and upskill. And what I like about what you're sharing is that those specific skills on a very long career, you will have multiple aha moments. I learned more about hiring, but like on the spectrum, maybe you were here and now you're here, right? I think that for a lot of people who are listening, it's not as appreciated as when you think about business, it's the same skills over and over, but at different levels. So you
Yes.
have finance, you have marketing, you have growth, you have sales, you have tech. I think that with that, you're pretty good. You have legals and you have accounting and finance, but I think I mentioned it. But like with those, okay, you're good to go. And how's your operation? How do you architect a team of 10 people, of 100 people, of 50 people? How do you hire an ops guy? How do you hire execs? How do you hire a tech team? And so it's like same problem, new setup, totally different solution. Like you can build an entire tech team and now you have to hire your ops director or your sales director. New playbook, nothing to do with it. And totally different approach, especially when you hire like engineers versus a CTO versus a sales director. HR, I forgot HR. This is another thing. I have follow-up questions, but do you want to share anything on that?
Just one thing is there's a great podcast called Founders. The guy started to do interviews, but he was not doing that. He was like just reading like biography and extracting knowledge from that biography, like how someone works. There's how Elon Musk, which is like a masterclass. And recently he shared like how Jensen works. And more recently, how Larry Jensen is the founder of like NVIDIA. And Larry Ellison works with the founders of Oracle. The most common things that he's sharing is like all these three, they shared in their books that they realize deep in their career, they said, I sucked at being a CEO the first 15 years of my life, of my CEO life. So it's interesting. Jensen said the first 15 years at NVIDIA, he was a bad CEO. And Larry Ellison is saying exactly the same thing. So you have to constantly learn and you're definitely not born as a founder. Maybe you have some extraordinary skills and you have some different skills than the others, but you have to learn. And I believe that you don't learn that in the books. You learn that by doing, and the experience is what matters above all. So you can read books, listen podcasts, etc. But between like what other people learn does and like what is really happening in your life, it's like applying that in your daily, like in your company is like pretty different.
Yeah, 100%. It's like applied philosophy. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter that you can quote Socrates or Plato if you can't apply those concepts to your day to
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But what I like about what you're saying is, well, if I have a problem in front of me and I'm going to read and listen podcasts, then as I listen, I think about my problems. And so I have more visibility on solutions, which is like the best way. Okay. So to wrap up, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. What's coming? What's next? What are you excited about? What do you feel like sharing? Are you hiring?
Of course, we're hiring, especially in marketing and engineering. But if you're passionate about what we're doing in the field, then you can just send us a message, and we're always open for like a new proposal. The second thing is what I'm excited the most. We have like new exciting like product features. We have super exciting new partnerships that's gonna go live in the coming weeks. We have something huge coming in January, changing the course of like the platforms. Like the next 6 months will be tremendously exciting. It's very intense, but we have a mission. Our mission is to build preventative health in Europe and help people get access to prevention solution, makes prevention accessible, like we say. That's our mission. This is the most amazing mission because you literally every day get like amazing feedback from your customers that you changed their life. They had these wake up calls looking at their data and they were like, I constantly heard for the last 10 years that I should reduce my alcohol consumptions, eat less sugar, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't care. But now seeing the data, I'm like kind of like, whoa, this is like a wake up call for me. And I completely changed my routine. And now I'm like 3 months in and I feel the best of my life. So this is the most rewarding effect for me. This is the first time in my life that I build a product my family has tried. My parents and my sister did the test and they never used the product I built in the past because it was like B2B SaaS product. I think that's part of the mission, is exciting. You can talk about your product at dinner for Christmas and people think like, there's always some people that will criticize, of course, but most of the people, they're excited. At least they understand what you're building. So this is really exciting.
Yeah, I think it might be easier to explain to your mom what you're doing right now compared to buffer.
Yes,
Getting
yes,
into
exactly.
gross axe techniques.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
she can just do the
Like
test.
scaling post was like, what the fuck is that?
Why?
Yeah, why? Why would
Amazing.
you do that? Yes.
That's exciting. Thank you very much for taking the time to coming on the podcast. I love the journey. I have so many more questions that we haven't touched on: operations, marketing, growth, etc. So potentially
we'll do another podcast later.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But I'm wishing you the best of luck and thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Max.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas.